I woke up one Tuesday and discovered I'd been locked out of my own house not by a storm, not by a fallen tree, but by an 8-foot brick wall where my gravel driveway met the road, standing there like it belonged to the world. For a second I thought I was still dreaming, or that someone had decided to prank an old man. Then I saw the sign, clean white black letters, like a judge's stamp. Private wall installation, Stonebridge Estates, HOA. My coffee went sour in my hand. Not the taste, the realization. I stood there in my work boots, coffee cooling, staring at bricks laid in a straight, smug line. Mortar still light gray, drying in the sun, like it had a point to prove. The wall cut my driveway off clean, like someone had drawn a line through my morning and called it progress. I live out here 12 acres that belonged to my Uncle Ray before anybody thought about gated fountains and matching mailboxes, and the difference between my place and the development over the hill is the difference between a country song and a brochure. We've got a tin roof, a barn that leans a little when the wind gets rough, an '88 Ford that coughs politely before it starts. Out there, the world sings coyotes and tractors. Over here, it's leaf blowers and perfectly trimmed hedges. Apparently that bothered some people. For years, the HOA tried to buy me out. First it was smiles and fruit baskets, people in pastel polos showing glossy plans for how my land would complete the community. I told them no. The polite requests shifted to letters. Gentle at first suggestions my barn wasn't in keeping with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Then someone actually wrote that my pickup was visually disruptive. I still laugh at that one. But under the sugarcoating was pressure. They wanted the strip of asphalt that connected their fancy subdivision to Millstone Road, because without it, their exit funneled into a choke point. More houses meant more traffic, more complaints, and they'd promised convenience to people who paid for convenience. I wasn't being stubborn for the sport of it. That land carried memory. It's where Uncle Ray taught me to rebuild a carburetor with nothing but patience and duct tape. It's where we buried 3 dogs under the old oak. It's where I scattered his ashes on a quiet morning when the sky bent low and respectful. You don't sell that to a brochure. So I expected nagging and maybe a lawsuit someday, not a wall. I walked the length of it the morning I found it, boots crunching over chip brick, and it felt like walking into someone's decision. The wall ran right across the mouth of my driveway, and a few feet each side, an obvious gesture of "we can." I called the number on the sign. It rang twice before a crisp voice answered, Stonebridge Estates Management Office. I told them who I was. There was polite paper shuffling. Then the board voted unanimously to install the barrier for safety and property value preservation. Safety, they said. I looked at my empty stretch of land and laughed, but the laugh didn't help the cold that slid down my spine. They told me the road access fell under Stonebridge oversight. That struck me wrong. Decades ago, the county had abandoned that little strip of road when traffic got rerouted. Quiet and cracked and overgrown, it sat until 5 years back when tired of people cutting through. I bought it at a county auction. Deed in the safe, taxes paid. Legally mine. I hung up and fetched that deed like it was a talisman. I smoothed the paper on my kitchen table until the creases felt like proof. Deputy Collins from the sheriff's station arrived an hour later, chewing gum, slow hat tipped back like he was trying to slow a morning that had already moved too fast. He read the deed, looked at the wall, whistled. "Well," he said, "that's new." I asked if he could tear it down. He looked at me like I'd asked him to declare war. "You want us to tear it down?" he repeated. I shook my head. No, I had a better idea. A better idea meant thinking rather than smashing, which for me felt oddly civilized. I called Carla Mendoza, a surveyor who used to work for my uncle. Carla measures with an insistence the way some folks pray she doesn't guess. She came out with her tripod flags, bright orange in the sun, and went about treating the land like it was a story with a map. 40 minutes later, she took off her shades and said, "They missed." By 3 feet, the wall crossed into my property. 3 feet is a sliver until it's not. In property law, 3 feet is the line between a misunderstanding and an overreach. I called Earl Simmons after that. Earl runs the welding shop down the road and thinks most problems can be solved with enough steel and a bad attitude. When I told him there was a wall blocking my driveway, he laughed low and dangerous. "You finally going to stop being polite?" he asked. I said I might try something creative instead. Earl liked the word creative. At the far end of the wall, the contractors had left a gap, not because they were thoughtful, but because they assumed that strip belonged to their project. We sized the gap up and laughed in an engineer's way, 14 feet wide. Big enough for a cattle gate, big enough for an idea. Earl fabricated a gate 14 feet high, heavy hinges, crossbars like an exclamation point. We painted it neon green, not subtle, the kind of color that says, "Look at me." Across it, we welded a plate, "Private road access by permission only." It felt petty and righteous in equal measure. Then, because I am not above a touch of theater, I tracked down an old wooden toll booth from a shuttered dirt racetrack outside town. 2 days later, that booth sat at the mouth of the asphalt. I owned a little sliding window, a roof that had seen better fares overhead, a simple hand-painted sign, "Toll road monthly access plans available." I printed laminated pricing and tacked it neatly in the booth. Residents $300 a month. Registered guests $15 per entry. HOA board members $750 a month. Non-negotiable. My conscience protested that this was petty. The rest of me shrugged and poured coffee into a thermos. Saturday morning, I opened the gate just enough to let me in, then closed it behind me and sat in the booth. I had a thermos, I had a clipboard of printed sheets, and I had a ridiculous plan. At 8:30, the first SUV rolled up. A woman in oversized sunglasses glanced at the booth like it was a prop. "What is this?" she asked. "Morning," I said. "Private toll road." Her eyebrows went somewhere suspicious. Engines queued up, people peered from behind steering wheels, phones came out. Within an hour, traffic had backed up past the development's fountain, the one they kept lit like a stage prop every night. Then Caleb Whitmore showed up. Caleb was the HOA president, mid-40s, polo, always pressed, the kind of man who arranges his lawn furniture for photographs. He marched toward the booth carrying a clipboard like it was armor. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I sipped my coffee slowly. "I'm regulating access to my private road," I said. He barked about public access, community responsibility, property values. He waved vaguely at the wall behind us like the bricks were an argument that would win itself. I told him calmly, "I tend to save my temper for the parts that need it. The road is deeded to me." I handed him a copy of Carla's survey. The bright orange flag still fluttered just beyond the brick like accusation. He went pale in that corporate way, then red, then angry. "You're creating a public nuisance," he spat. "I'm creating a toll road," I answered. There it was, the first crack in his certainty. And that's when I stopped being the quiet neighbor and started being a problem they hadn't planned on. The tool of my escalation wasn't violence. It was inconvenience and transparency. While Caleb dialed lawyers and his members complained and engines honked, I mailed certified letters to every homeowner in Stonebridge. Simple. Here is the deed. Here is the survey. Here is the cost of the wall you paid for, with HOA reserve funds, without a vote, without proper boundary verification. At the bottom, I wrote a paragraph that cost me nothing but tone. If the wall is removed, an apology issued, and damages covered, I'm willing to discuss shared access. No insults, no threats, just facts and terms. People don't like surprises when it's their money on the line. A week of social media and neighborly mutters later. $85,000, the figure the board had spent on the wall, looked like a mistake rooted in hubris. By Monday, Caleb returned not with shouts, but with a lawyer and a man in a suit who kept adjusting his tie like it was a noose. "We need to talk," Caleb said. The lawyer trained for these conversations spoke of misinterpretation and remedy. I let them say it. I listed my costs, gate booth survey, landscaping, and asked for receipts. They offered to remove the wall within 48 hours to issue a written apology to compensate documented damages. That admission shifted the season. 2 days later, the demolition crew arrived. Bricks, stacked mortar dust, hung in the air like the ghost of a bad decision. I stood at the property line watching and felt a quiet, steady satisfaction that wasn't triumphant noise. It was restoration, the righting of a tilt. Carla came by to confirm the property restored to file the signed report. A week later, a certified letter arrived with an apology and a check including a little extra labeled goodwill. 2 weeks after that, Caleb resigned as HOA president. I didn't dance on the lawn. I didn't throw a parade. I made a cup of coffee and sat on the porch and watched headlights pass the edge of my property like they always had. Winning doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like a door you close gently after someone decided to step over its sill without permission. The toll booth stayed for a while, a laughable monument to the conversation I'd forced, and then we drafted a shared access agreement, transparent, modest fee for maintenance recorded and signed. No surprises, no midnight bricklaying. More than the paperwork, what changed was me. I used to show up at the mailbox and slide the HOA letters in a drawer, assuming silence bought me safety. It doesn't. Silence makes you easier to reshape. Now I speak up earlier, calm but clear with documentation. Boundaries matter, not just the metal pins in the ground, but the invisible ones between entitlement and respect, between convenience and taking. Some people still thought I was a villain that week, the stubborn country guy who made their commute complicated. Others brought pies, apologized for decisions they didn't personally make, and stood on my porch and told me they were sorry the board had used their funds without them. Most folks, stripped of branding and brochures, just wanted fairness. So here's the part I keep turning over in my head, and I'd like to hear what you think. Was I right to take things as far as I did? Could filing a complaint and letting the sheriff act have been enough? Or was the toll booth the kind of message that needed to be sent? Where's the line between standing up and escalating? I don't ask to be heroic. I just want to know if the way I defended a piece of land that held a life was reasonable. If you've ever tangled with an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who thought they could redraw your boundaries without asking, tell me. Tell me how you handled it. Did you call a lawyer, or did you build a neon gate and buy a booth? Share the outcome. Because sometimes the road under your wheels isn't as public as you think. And sometimes the quiet neighbor at the edge of the map owns more than you realize.